dear friends, colleagues and partners from election observation organizations, international and domestic organizations from Europe, from the Americas and Africa, dear Dame Audrey Glover, dear Pat Merloe, dear members of the European Parliament, of the European Commission and Council, dear representatives of, we have also European embassies here. Welcome to the first FURIC conference. I'm more than happy to see you all here tonight at this conference. My name is Stefanie Schiffer. I'm the chair of the European Platform for Democratic Elections. Is it okay with the sound? Yeah, it's very good, okay, good. The EPDE, as lots of you know, has been set up 11 years ago in Warsaw, and as a reaction to increasing pressure on citizen election observers in the OSCE region. This was the first reason why we set up this platform. The other reason was that the European citizen election observers wanted their voices to be heard louder in the international institutions, foremost in the European institutions. And there is huge progress, I would say, with the second objectives. I think making the voices of citizen election observers heard better and louder on a European institutional level, this was a success, and many of you here in the room have greatly contributed to that. And nobody would seriously say today that citizen election observers are not perceived as key actors in elections in the OSCE region. This is a big success. When it comes to the second objective of setting up the EPDE, pressure and shrinking space, we have unfortunately no success story to tell at all. We have today more repression of citizen election observation in the region than 10 years ago, or maybe even than 30 years ago. Russian aggression against any democratic movement, be it in the country, in Russia, be it outside, and the war against Ukraine have led to the demolition of a European security order and to the worst human rights situation in Europe since the end of World War II. International institutions are challenged and weakened through this new war in Europe. Their established methods, structures and procedures hardly cope with this new situation. Russia's membership in the Council of Europe has been terminated. Still, Russia's membership in the OSCE is problematic. Its misuse of a consensus principle and budget pressure endangers the functioning of the very institution. Citizen election observers stand at the forefront in this struggle for rule of law and human rights. Observers are often the first objectives when it comes to curtailing civil liberties. It is our common responsibility to defend one another, to stand in for our colleagues, and to improve mechanisms that can protect not only citizen election observation, but physically citizen election observers, wherever they are. We deeply feel that we are not complete here in this room of this conference. EPDE is badly missing those friends and colleagues, citizen election observers, who are not with us today. This is Vladimir Lapkovich, is Valentin Stefanovic, Ales Belyatsky, Marfa Rabkova. They are imprisoned in Belarus since 2.5 years for reporting on the falsification of the presidential elections of 2020. Grisha Melkonians, he is 100 days in Russian pre-trial detention that shall prevent him from observing the upcoming presidential elections in Russia. Timur Abubakarov, Andriy Babinsky and Ostabrinsky are Ukrainian election observers. They have lost their lives defending their country and our freedom in Ukraine, in the war of Russia against Ukraine. I want to beg you, all of us, for a minute of silence for our friends and colleagues. Thank you very much. Established democracies face their own challenges. Taking free elections for granted, neglecting public oversight, forgetting about checks and balances of election management, ignoring necessary control over party and campaign financing, reluctance towards the implementation of electoral recommendation in established democracies may lead to a reform backlog that on a long perspective can make also established democracies fail. This FURIC conference is an effort to bring actors from international and civil society election institutions together to tackle these threats, to develop strategies and to define concrete action. Not less is at stake than our European democracies. I'm opening this conference right now with you all together, but in fact the conference, we must say, we understand, has started months before, when Alex Schlick and Adam Busilianu drafted the very first conference concept. This was, I think, it was around about in August. And since that time, I think the conference is already lasting. There was an uninterrupted series of discussions, Zoom conferences, telephone calls, consultations between I don't know where and where, some of them in our office, and I would say a whole series of permanent pre-conferences. Finally, the perfect conference concept and perfect conclusion paper were agreed upon, and you find them in your preparatory documents, and we will consult them and discuss them. And I want to express my great gratitude to Alex Schlick for this immense work, to all election experts who have been involved and contributed to these documents, namely to Beata Rosomilovic, to Tatjana Hilscher-Bogusevich, and to Harald Jespen, who have all contributed, consulted. Patrick also gave his word, and it was really a very inclusive and active expert process. So thank you all of you for your contributions. I also want to use the opportunity to thank the EPDE Secretariat for organizing our well-being here and comfortable circumstances for work today and also tomorrow. This is Ada, Ms. Kira, is Matthias, Lesan, Hannah, and Natalia. You find them everywhere, and they will help us today and tomorrow to have a good meeting here. Finally, I also want to express my gratitude to the German Foreign Ministry, which makes the financial support for having this conference today here. So now I wish us all a fruitful discussion tonight and tomorrow, and I'm happy to pass the word to our first keynote speaker, Dame Audrey Glover. I briefly introduce you. Everybody knows you, but still, everybody knows you. Audrey was a director of the OSCE ODIHR in 1994 to 1997. By education, a British diplomat, and by compassion, an election observer. After having observed dozens of elections, international elections, we are very glad to have you here. It's an honor, and we invite you to have a first word to us. Thank you. Dame Audrey.
Thank you very much, Stefanie. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Stefanie, and good evening, everybody. I would say that it's a great pleasure and privilege to address this group this evening, and not too sure what that was, but it doesn't appear to have been very dangerous, so that's good. And I would like to congratulate the organizers of this conference for the work they have done in order to bring so many different people from all over the world together. That's quite an achievement, and I think they need a big round of applause. Well, to get to the matter in hand this evening, in the early 1990s, elections and the observations of them were greeted with great enthusiasm. They were seen as a step towards democracy. But against the backdrop of a fragmenting world, it is fair to say that democracy and human rights, to which we all attach much importance, are now becoming eroded in the face of populism, authoritarianism, and autocracy. We're witnessing increasing anxiety around the world, arising from widening conflict, climate change, ill health, migration, and the rapid development of new technologies, notably AI. This growing anxiety is generating a feeling among citizens that governments do not listen to them and do not represent them. This sense of living in an unstable world highlights the needs for serious and urgent changes to enable human rights to survive and thrive rather than face the threat of extinction. Citizens and international observers need to cooperate together to restore them, so enabling communities in a country to benefit from their implementation. It is, of course, profoundly challenging to reinstate the recognition of the importance of implementing human rights. As has been said many times before, elections and their observation are not an end in themselves. Their objective is to help states to implement and put into effect their electoral commitments and thus contribute to the growth and strength of democracy. One of the reasons why human rights have become sidelined arises from the lack of implementation of the recommendations which feature as an important section of final reports after election observation missions. One often sees the repeated replication of recommendations appearing after observation missions in certain countries, despite offer of ODIHR assistance to overcome difficulties in implementation. Election observation is, in my opinion, beneficial only to the extent that the recommendations are considered seriously and implemented. If they are not, the disregard for human rights in that country will slowly increase, as we have seen happen. Meeting this challenge should attract more attention. This is where cooperation between independent civil society organizations, international observers, and international organizations comes into play. They can and should work together to reassure citizens and make politicians aware of the need to make changes to implement human rights and safeguard electoral integrity. Okay. I'm not too sure what that pop was, but never mind. Oh, champagne, that sounds great. Drawing on the skills, motivation, and resilience of citizens and civil society organizations in that state. Such initiatives can lead to the organization of training programs to help implement the necessary changes to existing electoral legislation. And for this to happen, citizens have ultimately to trust that their government will serve the public interest. If this willingness exists, reforms can be delivered. It is also important to ensure that certain groups of people who might be underrepresented, such as minorities, women, and the disabled, are also included. Community, after all, is the building block of resilience. To protect and improve their observation of elections, the EU, Council of Europe, EPDE, and the ODIHR already work with civil society and international organizations to ensure that elections carried out in a country comply with international law. There are societies in most countries that are involved with observing elections and in specializing in different aspects of them, such as media, finance, minorities, and out-of-country voting, among others. It would be beneficial if observation missions from different organizations observing an election worked more closely with civil society organizations based in a country, because they know what is happening there all the time, including, of course, during the run-up to elections, elections themselves, and afterwards. They should work together to complement each other. In addition, there are institutions within the OSCE that can make statements about elections. For example, the chairperson in office, the meeting of the Human Dimension Implementation Committee, and the participating states themselves, among others. We should hear their voices more loudly, as this would assist the ODIHR in the work that they do. It of course helps if there is a comprehensive follow-up strategy which the states concerned have committed to implement, and various groups can all work together to ensure and secure the recommended improvements. We should not forget either that both the OSCE and the Council of Europe have parliamentary assemblies that also play a role in observing elections, and they also have youth parliaments who could become involved in the revival and growth of human rights. And of course, one should never overlook the role of diplomacy and that of the diplomatic community. The engagement of civil society organizations would of course not just relate to one election, but would assist with future ones, and moreover ensure that international organizations were kept informed by the changes made by states. In the forthcoming discussions, other important issues will obviously be discussed, such as the funding of civil society organizations and how they and international observers and organizations can work together before, during, and after an election. The time has most certainly come to speak out significantly more than at present and more loudly about the importance of implementing election recommendations and thereby saving human rights from possible extinction and possibly even that of election observation itself. In conclusion, I very much hope that this meeting will be able to agree upon the draft concluding document that has been circulated. This step will help countries to implement election recommendations and so give new life to human rights and diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dame Audrey, for this very clear call on the importance of the implementation of recommendations. This is the point we will discuss further. And now I never have to introduce Pat. I do it still, Pat Merloe. We're so happy that you are here. You made the long way to us from US. Really, thank you very much. This is a honor that you're here with us tonight. Without him, we would not be here, I think. He is really the driving force by developing tools and strategies and methods of citizen election observation worldwide from the 80s as an NDI expert. And I think, thinking of you, I understand what a person can make. With good networks, with good friends and good ideas, this is amazing. So Pat Merloe, you played also a key role in drafting the Declaration of Principles of International Election Observation and of the Global Principles for Non-Partisan Election Observation, which led to the setting up of a GNDEM, where EPDE is a proud member of a global network of domestic election monitors, and where Olga Aivazovska is a member or board of a chair, which is a fantastic, a very important organization. So thank you for being here, and I invite you to address us on the question of the implementation of recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefanie, and I join Audrey in the congratulations to you and EPDE for putting this together. I have to give a salute to Olha, who is on the wall over there in a bigger-in-life form. It's hard to imagine standing next to her. She's always bigger than life than any of us. But my friend, who I always learn from, and Audrey, who I always follow. I mean, we may joke with one another, but I have to say, and in my prepared remarks, I will say something about her incredible role in bringing these sorts of things about. So I warn you, I've been at this a long time, really since my student days in the United States, where I continue to be somewhat of a troublemaker on behalf of the people's voice and for democracy, elections, and human rights in my own country. Otherwise, how could I stand before you or anyone else and talk about the international dimension unless I were doing something as a citizen myself? I warn you also that Stefanie invited me to make remarks as long as I wanted. But I think 15 minutes is probably more than what you can tolerate, so I'll try very much to stick to that. But, you know, I mean, let me start with an invitation to invite all of us here to think of this conference not simply as a valuable opportunity to explore the importance of effective follow-up on observer recommendations. And not only to think about this as a critical opportunity to further advance the cooperation between domestic citizen nonpartisan observers and international observers. They're both very important. But what we are undertaking here is more than either of those things. I mean, in essence, we're addressing both how to defend and to advance democracy in the face of strengthened authoritarianism around the world, in a global era of digital disinformation, and the potential, as Audrey said, impacts of generative AI. These are new challenges. They are different challenges than when I first came into this arena, and probably new than when many, or if not all of you, came into the arena. We're doing this in the face of Russia's imperialist attempt to destroy democracy in Ukraine, and in the face of horrific acts of terrorism and dramatic violations of international humanitarian law that are shown in our headlines today, and that are happening in other places that aren't as well noticed around the world. We're here engaging in an urgent and forward-looking exchange about how to secure the basic democratic norm, that the authority to govern flows from the people through universal and equal suffrage rather than from self-proclaimed rights or the power to dominate within a country or across borders. We're defending a free and informed choice through genuine elections, which is safeguarding the essence of popular sovereignty. It's a rather big topic that we're going to be discussing in the next day or so. Our efforts require coordination on a scale beyond election observation. It primarily requires the determined efforts and actions that are sustained by citizens to exercise and protect their sovereignty through elections and broader public participation. It also requires principled and robust actions by the international community that provides incentives to democratic development, support, direct support and solidarity for domestic actors, and accountability for those who would subvert or nullify the people's will. Nonpartisan citizen election monitoring and the related advocacy plays a critical role in a constellation of domestic actors that also includes those who are addressing disinformation, political violence, and illicit political finance, among others. It includes traditional news media and new communications media that have to be brought into the picture. It involves political parties and candidates, parliaments, and also the election management bodies. On the international front, international election observers play important roles, but as do intergovernmental organizations and multilateral lending institutions, bilateral development assistance agencies, the embassies and foreign ministries, and the developed countries' parliaments, civil society, and news media as well. All of these actors have a responsibility to protect and to advance democracy, to sharpen democratic power, to effectively counter authoritarianism's global reach, and to better reinforce each other, to match and overcome the authoritarian learning and coordinated authoritarian action on regional and global stages, as well as in particular countries. In effect, what we are considering is how to create and nourish a democratic ecosystem, recognizing that elections are the equivalent of keystone species. That is, one that defines and has a disproportionately large impact on the entire ecosystem, noting that other democratic species are also crucial. This means that we have to be proactive, with concerted and sustained efforts in, around, and beyond elections, recognizing their interconnectedness to the success of democratic governance. And we have to recognize that the efforts must reach and instill confidence in the citizenry where it is merited. That is essential because even if elections are credible, when a significant segment of the population has been made to believe otherwise, electoral outcomes and democratic governance can be in jeopardy. We only have to look to the United States to understand this. Citizens and international election observers play a crucial role in this respect as the ones who note the system's state of health, where there are breaches in the system and what needs to be done to repair and to advance it. That is why election observer recommendations need much more effective follow-up to produce significant results, and why even more effective coordination among citizen and international observers merits our commitment. And as part of a broader system, we need to build stronger alliances with other actors to catalyze systemic progress. Institutions, both nationally and internationally, likewise must better appreciate their responsibilities and act effectively to sharpen democratic power, to better coordinate and mutually reinforce action which is possible and which we should note that progress has been made. Effective domestic and international cooperation can be identified in dramatic examples where autocrats' plans to seize or to cling to power have been blocked and democracy has been saved or restored. We can look at the examples provided by Chile, Peru, Ukraine, Georgia, just to name a few. Such cooperation also has contributed decisively to reinforcing public confidence in credible elections, which help to avoid crises and potential violence. Examples of that include the first multi-party elections in Bulgaria or in Zambia and other places around the world. Our modern chapter started in the Philippines, which we probably all know, in 1986, where the National Movement for Free Elections, NAMFREL, mobilized 500,000 citizens across that country to collect election results and feed their independent tabulation to verify the outcome of the election. We all know that that verification showed that Marcos lost, even though his institutions said he was the victor. A joint, in fact, the first election observation by NDI and the International Republican Institute was present in 1986 in the Philippines. They had evaluated the credibility of NAMFREL and in their statements brought attention not only to the rapidly developing events, to the potential and unveiling the fraud, but brought attention to NAMFREL's findings. Their actions, their reports, got the attention of the international community, which helped to contribute to the outcome. We all know that Marcos left the Philippines as a result of these developments. What we don't note as much is that the following electoral and democratic reform in the Philippines included the decisive role of NAMFREL civil society with the support of the international community. This is a role model that has been repeated and that we're seeking to make even more effective in the future. Recognizing the importance of what NAMFREL represented, I can say that NDI, before my time, brought leaders from a number of civil society organizations around the world to learn from that model in the Philippines. A consequence of which was they, plus NDI's efforts, helped the spread of citizen election observation to now more than 90 countries, in the development of regional networks, some of which are represented here with us tonight, and in the development of the global network for domestic election monitors, which Olha leads, as well as being a participant in EPEDE, and she'll give us a perspective on that. One thing that I would like to note over the decades is that citizen election monitoring, now on 5 continents, together has joined with international election monitors in cooperation in many places. And the UN General Assembly has recognized this and their contributions, another important development. This year, joint efforts between the 2 observation communities led to the special rapporteurs of the UN, both the rapporteur for human rights defenders and for the right to assembly, spoke out and recognized election observers as human rights defenders entitled to the protections that go with that designation. this is something that we really should stop and think about, because in Audrey, as a professor in this arena, we know that international development, particularly normative development, moves rather slowly. In just 40 years, these kinds of recognitions are something of an exceptional accomplishment. Then I want to turn just for a quick moment on what's a highly relevant historical note for the greater European region. And that was the development of the Copenhagen document, particularly paragraph 8. And we all know that it says that participating states commit to accept international and citizen election observers. If you study the language, it's not quite that clear. And it took the efforts of Dame Audrey Glover as the director of the ODIHR, along with her first director of elections, Gerald Mitchell, and their successors, to convince the participating states that this meant citizen observers. There was good cooperation on the ground between citizen observers and ODIHR missions, and the ODIHR worked to get the OSCE's missions in country to help in democratic reform. I was a witness to this in my NDI role in many countries, and I can't stand here without bringing that historic moment and landmark to our attention, and to say that, you know, I'm proud to be next to Audrey whenever I have that opportunity. The EU, of course, and other intergovernmental organizations, the OAS is represented here as well. The NGOs internationally, like the Carter Center and NDI, have embraced citizen election observation and cooperation through our work as well. But that said, there's no other resolution or similar instrument as presently relevant, as comprehensive, and as powerful as the October draft of the European Parliament's resolution. And Nacho, who is with us, Nacho Sánchez Amor, a member of the European Parliament, was not only the special rapporteur on that, he is the brilliant leader that brought it across. And I think I have to say, probably with Christina, who is with us, Stefanie, and her staff probably contributed a bit to the effort. It's not only relevant to the conversation and discussions inside European institutions, which I hope is going to take place at a serious level. It's important to our deliberations, and I hope that it will be distributed to participants and we can make use of it in the deliberations tomorrow, because it provides a roadmap with very detailed steps in many arenas that are quite useful. In fact, I think as advocates, we would be wise to take this resolution beyond Europe. In the newly formed Global Network to Secure Electoral Integrity, which has both intergovernmental and non-governmental participants, it's a document that should be discussed and should be used. We should find a way to bring it into the deliberations around the Summit for Democracy, because I think it is comprehensive and it has the importance of the European Parliament's blessing on this. And I think that gives it much more authority than anything that I personally could say or that many of us in the room could bring to the conversation. Now, I will end by looking at just a couple references to where we stand and where we're going. And there's 3 elections that I'd like to make note of: Guatemala, Sierra Leone, and Zimbabwe, all of which are living with us as we're present here tonight. In the case of Guatemala, international and citizen observers regularly shared information, including the citizen observers' independent verifications of the results, which clearly showed the victory of Bernardo Avaldo. Those in Guatemala who are presently and actively working to undermine and to subvert the people's voice in that election are putting pressure on citizen observers and international observers. This is an example where robust and effective international action is needed to complement what the citizens are doing on the streets in that country. And principled steps have been taken. Within those steps, there have been references to the findings of the international and citizen observers, which shows the important role that they can play even as dramatic events are unfolding. And today, the Secretaries General of both the Organization of American States and the Community of Democracies released a very important statement around Guatemala. And it's something that has to be followed up with effective bilateral diplomatic efforts, but it's something that needs to be applauded and recognized by us because both the OAS and the Community of Democracies have supported the efforts of us in this room. In Sierra Leone, there's another example of good cooperation between international and citizen election observers. Most notably, of course, with the National Election Watch, NEW, which has been long established in Sierra Leone, in which Holly Ruthroth, sitting here, might want to duck out, but played a role in their founding as well. This includes work that NEW did in verifying the election results and questioning the official tabulation. International observers and citizen observers have made reference to those. International observers called upon protection of the rights of the citizen observers in Sierra Leone as pressure on them developed. Regional associations of citizen election observers also played a role. The AfroNet, one of the leaders of which is sitting with us, really helped to get the word out about the findings of NEW in Sierra Leone. And the West African Network of Election Observers, WION, took Sierra Leone's news leaders into safe houses in their own country when they needed to leave because of the threats that were against them. This kind of solidarity and cooperation is something that we have to note and something that we need to support. In Zimbabwe, unfortunately, there are many lessons concerning what autocratic regimes will do to try to stifle election monitoring, both international and domestic. There have been examples of where recognized international organizations have been denied accreditation to Zimbabwe's elections. There have been examples of where visas have been denied to observation mission leaders. Examples of where visas have been postponed so that observation could not be done effectively in the pre-election period. And this year, as the counting of results were taking place in the polling stations, armed security officials raided the headquarters of the citizen election observations by the Election Resource Center and the Zimbabwe Election Support Network, ZESN. Their data center was not just raided and people taken prisoner, but also they confiscated the equipment that were being used to do an independent verification of the voting results. More than 40 people are now facing politically motivated prosecutions in Zimbabwe. Now, the deputy mission leader from the European Union mission is sitting right here with us, Beate Martin Rosemulowicz, who is going to be on a panel tomorrow, and I suspect that she will be able to tell us more about what transpired there and in the many other countries where she has been. But this is another example of where concerted action is needed and where I would recognize the role of the European Union in that respect as well. One more note needs to be made before I put down the microphone. That we all have seen in many countries, autocrats mobilize sham international and citizen election observers to bless their manipulations and even their stealing of elections. This is an arena where EPED has done work in documenting sham observation, which has been useful along with the work of academics as we've studied this and tried to figure out what are countermeasures to be taken. But added to that are increased examples where autocrats are mobilizing digital armies to distort the information environment. Sitting in the second row is somebody who may talk to us tomorrow about how to counter disinformation on that front. And not only is it a distortion, there is hate speech that's being promulgated, conspiracy theories, attacks on election observers, and really an attempt to cause a tsunami aimed at drowning public confidence in elections and legitimate electoral outcomes. So in the detailed working sessions tomorrow, I hope that we will not just talk about these in generalities, but to dig into them and to come up with some solutions and steps to take, not to put any pressure on Laura Thornton and others. So my message is threefold. We should have hope. We need to muster determination, and we must up our game to meet these new challenges. The ecosystem is real. We need to address the political environment just as we need to address the natural environment, to sustain the human species with human dignity through democracy and elections, which are crucial. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Pat, for these inspiring remarks. I would like to invite Nacho Sánchez, who was already mentioned several times, to the panel. Yeah, and Nacho Sánchez is a member of European Parliament, and as was mentioned, he's a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of a DEG, of a Democracy and Election Group of the Parliament. And he's a co-initiator and author of this resolution, which is really very interesting and important. And we have sent it to all participants, and we have also sent 2 documents. This is a research, which has been a basis for this resolution, with interesting scientific research on the malpractice of interference into elections. The resolution is called Strengthening the Right to Participate, Legitimacy and Resilience of Electoral Processes in Illiberal Political Systems and Authoritarian Regimes. I'm sure we will talk about this tonight and also tomorrow. Thank you for being here, Nacho Sánchez. And I will also introduce our next speaker, Olga Aivazovska. I have already been welcomed. Olga is chair of OPORA, the citizen network movement of election observation in Ukraine. She's chair of the GNDEM, the global network of domestic election monitoring. And now Olga is you're in Kiev now, but often you are also now, due to the war, in Warsaw, where you're working with the Center for the Ukrainian Victory in documentation of war crimes, Russian war crimes. Olga, we're happy to have you here on the screen and discussing with us. We know that in Europe, Ukraine is the country with the best track record and the most active participation of citizens in political affairs, in common affairs, and the most successful, the biggest success stories in matching and shaping the political life. And Ukraine has demonstrated to whole Europe what citizens can do to contribute to the transformation of an authoritarian to a democratic state, including to contribute to participatory and open election processes. My question, Olga, to you would be, what have been the preconditions for this success? You are part of this success story, Olga, you and your movement. What have been the preconditions? And what would have been, maybe second question, additional help from the international community, maybe to reinforce, to accelerate these processes? This would be my question, if you would not wish to comment to something that our speakers have said before.
So, Stefanie, hello, and hello to everyone from the snowy Kyiv. I'm already in Kyiv, and I'm really happy that Civil Network OPORA became a global network, because my colleague is in Brussels, another colleague has a speech now in Warsaw about justice and accountability, and the other colleague has its own statement and presentation in Strasbourg in the European Council office. So I believe that the story about success is very visible and predictable. So to work hard, to believe what you want to change, and to work on a daily basis, nothing special. But I want to start my small statement from the general perspective why we are fighting for democracy in Ukraine. So Ukraine is a very young democracy for sure, and we became an independent country after the Soviet Union collapse. But more than 300 years, Ukraine tried to save its own identity and fight it for having this state which will defend this identity, culture, language, and so on and so forth. After the years of colonization of Russia, doesn't matter what name this state had before, like Moscow Empire or Soviet Union or Russian Federation, we decided many years ago to become independent state. And you may know that after the Soviet Union collapse, Ukraine was only one country which organized nationwide referendum about its own independence. So we did our choice 32 years ago according to international standards and according to the potential social contract which had to be established after that referendum. And why we are fighting for democracy? Because it's a part of our identity already. Ukraine had 4 revolutions during 30 years of independence. And I don't believe that that none of the Ukrainian presidents could become an authoritarian leader in a classical manner, because each time when president or power group decided to change a power of society to participate on the governing of the processes in its own state, society did step moving forward to having protest or to participate in reforms or prevent some shrinking changes in the state. And it became a part of our New Age history and New Age culture. I believe that there are 3 types of basic motivation to having social contract. First of all, it's about justice. The second one is about security. The third one, it's about inclusive process. You may know many philosophies which develop their methodology or their position about social contract. But we have 3 in one contract already. And this is about participation of civil society in each of the process of development of its own state. For many years, we fought for being a part of European Union. You may know that in 2013, we had a revolution of dignity. And after that, when OPORA trained police for doing the best role during election process, and I had feedback from the policemen on the basic level that we had a feeling that we already have a dignity in the process. We are not puppets of the big bosses from the presidential office or our ministers, and it was the best outcomes of the process of relationship between civil society and police. Why reform happening in Ukraine, especially in democracy sphere? Because it's happening on the daily basis when civil society has to fight for progress, not just during conferences. Unfortunately, we need to negotiate with each of the public servants about next step of reforms, which are very painful for them because they need to be more transparent, more accountable, and more professional. And when we're speaking about democracy, I have a best message for you. Democracy is not a state of being, it's a process of becoming. That's why civil observers groups is not just about election process. The most important what is happening in between. It's about capacity building. It's about internal reforms. It's about diplomacies and development relationship with power groups and opposition with foreign partners, international organizations. Because without that, you will not have any power to have influence in your own country. How you can have influence in the region or globally if you don't have a power even in your own country? According to the General Declaration about human rights, you know better than me that when we are speaking about influence of society, time to time it's about elections, but first of all, it's about direct power of society to be a part of the process, not just election process. So, as I mentioned already, philosophical base about good social contract, which has mixed security, justice, and inclusive process. I have to say the same or very close things about a relationship between civil society groups on the ground and international partners. I believe that we need to be partners. not the biggest one, not the smallest one, not the youngest or oldest, but we need to be partners. And such conferences is basically promote the idea to sit on the same stage. Unfortunately, I'm online, to speak directly and honestly, not just about success stories, but about some mistakes and gaps in the relationship. And we will be success if we will build trust in between each other, respect, that there is no younger friend and more powerful groups, and it's about professionalism. And if civil society groups on the local level or global level and international partners will have the same level of professionalism, will have the same list of priorities and values, why we are participating on the process, and will be oriented on results, not just process for process, we will have success. As Ukraine has success, even during the hot stage of the war, we need to fight for having democracy in Ukraine. We have official martial law. That's why it's legally that we don't have enough freedoms and rights during this period. First of all, I'm speaking about freedom of speech or media space, but it doesn't matter if you still have influence on the political process or process of the governing of the territories. And we have to understand that now this is era of hot stage of the global war. Authorities or authoritarian regimes against democracies. For sure, it's very visible. And we need to exclude anything like, it's not us, it's not about us, it's so far from my country, it's so far from my society, because we will lose the chance to build the democratic system as a good practice of communication and a relationship between society and between state. And I need to highlight why it's so important for us. It's not just about having feeling that we are the equal part of societies like global society and local society. It's about security. And I believe security is a very needable thing for each of us. Because for civil society observers, when we are speaking international organization, it's about physical security. Sometimes we need to call someone and you need to visit this place because next time something will happen. And we lost 2 observers physically in Crimea in 2012. We had a problem with some criminal groups in Ukraine when we fought for rule of law and democratic processes. And we had a good cooperation with Canadian observers, for example, when they were ready to visit this polling station because OPORA called them and said, sorry, but without you, it will be difficult to defend ourselves. Political security is even more important, or fighting against anti-blackmailing, blackmailing against civil society observers. You may know that last time when we had local elections in Kharkiv, so local actors falsified 40 protocols. They changed just a little bit the numbers for not having the second round. So, but the problem was that OPORA was under the pressure of these semi-criminal or local groups, and G7 did the statement, and it helped us to stop that blackmailing campaign against OPORA. So, and the same story about harmonization of the not reports, but results of observation between civil society groups and international organizations. I believe we had very good success stories already. For example, NDI, IRI, NATO, and others, they had, NDI and IRI and NATO separately, they had observation mission in Ukraine. And I was happy when Pat and his colleague just visited OPORA's office and asked, what do you think? What do we need to highlight? Because we knew that it will be very important for locals to fight for reforms after the end of campaigning. And if international organizations will highlight the correct recommendation or will prioritize them, it will help us to work after the end of campaigning in successful manner. And the last point, that I believe that such type of activities you have now on the base of this conference and post-conference activity, first of all, will help to develop common, not values, but understanding how to move them forward on practical way. Let's stop to talk about common values. We have them on the papers. Let's think about first steps, how to adopt this good wording about values and good practices, and to do like not just campaigning for having reform, but to protect which we already have. I need to speak about Ukraine. Now we are fighting about democracy for ourselves. It's true. If Ukraine will lose the war, for sure, someone will be the next. And this is the best practice or example or exercise for authoritarian regimes, that they are enough powerful to fight against democracies, because democracies are not so weak as we need sometimes. So let's try to do the best from our side. But the best practice or success formula is only one: to work hard on daily basis and to cooperate with good people or people of goodwill inside the country and outside the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga, very much. This was a very clear answer, what is needed, what is necessary, and also why, because it's a question of security. Democracy is also a question of security. Nobody knows that better than you in Ukraine, and nobody made clearer how to fight and how to stand for that. And the point you made is about also on the election level, that this mutual security, the security for domestic observers through the international missions, is really a point that we should be aware of. And I myself, I remember these situations, some of them having been in Ukraine that time. So this is one of the points we have included in this conclusion paper, where we call for better structured forms of cooperation, structured and sustainable forms of cooperation between international and domestic observers. So this is an important aspect why this is really so necessary. Thank you, Olga, for that. I'm sure there will be questions and comments later to your remarks. I will now give a question, Nacho Sánchez. Has been mentioned this very important resolution of a foreign committee, where you make a very clear and very detailed, I think, additionally with these additional researchers, the need to protect elections from falsification, not only from falsification, also from imitation, and from multiple methods of illiberal regimes to grant themselves with legitimacy. This is an important aspect. We should talk about it. And also in this, where do you see, maybe for framing it in the question of our conference, where do you see in these efforts synergies of combining citizen election observation efforts, civil activism, and the international observation? Is this would be a stronger way maybe to tackle these challenges for elections?
Well, thank you, Stefanie. Thank you for the invitation to EPDE. When I received a call from Alex, or a text message, I don't remember, I said immediately, yes, of course, count on me. But I was not aware that there was a gathering of friends, because it's Beata, Holly, Ulvi, Pat, thank you for your words on the resolution. Audrey, we were together in Turkey in the year 15. At that moment, Alex had a very well-earned image of being a very tough guy with the politicians. But I have to say I worked perfectly with Alex. It was very rewarding. And for that reason, we have this excellent relation. And I'm happy to see you. Where have you been, guys, for some years? On the resolution, what is the idea? Mainly, we address the election observation as a political process. And I think we have we need to complement this approach with another approach, right-based. In which way? We say how Olga said, and Pat, and maybe Audrey, the idea of the ownership of the elections is in the people. My approach is, let's complement the idea of the people owning the political process, of the personal right of every citizen to participate in free and fair elections. That is included in the DOP, but is not so clear. And when we drafted our conclusions, we talk a lot about the right to associate, the right to manifest, the right to demonstrate, the right to write and to receive information, but we never mentioned the right to participate, because the other are rights or liberties instrumental to the right at the core of the election. Is the right of every single citizen to participate in free and fair election. I think we have to start quoting this idea. This is an idea that has been put forward, not directly on the right to participate, but Volker to talk about. We have to approach electoral observation as a right-based process, not only a political process. But this is the idea. And the other idea, very dangerous for us, is in this landscape of authoritarian state and regimes and illiberal practices and narratives, we have to change completely our mindset, completely. Till the extent that I think the electoral observation has changed its very nature, because we were doing electoral observation for the countries willing to do things better. But now we are working for the countries only to pretend having a democratic legitimacy. And then we are not assisting the elections, trying to signal and to point what things you have to improve, but to say you don't have a real democratic legitimacy. And we are becoming a kind of early warning system, because elections has become one of the strategies to legitimize authoritarian rules. And then after the election, no check and balances, no right to minorities, but always exhibiting the idea of, but in this country there were ballot boxes. And people approach the ballot boxes and it's done. And we have to try to unveil these narratives, and this is the idea of the resolution, and a very interesting academic paper that I think has been conveyed to you all, that is at the base of this political resolution. On the domestic observation, I think this is the real trend now. We have jumped a little bit over the not so easy issue of how to collaborate with other international observation, not always having our standards, and asking for drafting with us our preliminary results. But we are aware that not every international observation mission working beside us in a country had the same level of engagement or demands or standards. But we have, Stefanie, we are avoiding this. But we have to talk about, I'm not talking about the conference, but this is an item we have to talk about. Are we ready to engage with every single international observation to produce our preliminary statements? Well, it depends. In my experience, it's very difficult. Regarding domestic observation, I have a horrible experience. Some of you, Ulbi and Holly, I had a horrible observation because one of the leaders of the domestic observation in an African country, when leaving the premises of the training course, was assassinated when he was entering the car. And only because the hitman had a car accident, we were able to know that there were policemen in plain clothes killed, and a leader of domestic observation. Meaning, of course, we have to take care about the security issues, our security issues, and the security issues of anyone participating in electoral observation. But this is also, at the same time, and dramatically, recognition of the role of the domestic observers. If the domestic observers are useless or not threatening the regime, they are not going to be killed. And this is the thing we have to be aware and to take care, because our position from the moral point of view is a little bit complicated. We visit the country, we enjoy the protection of the international community, but the guys, they are going to still there. And they can suffer the consequences of a good domestic observation after we leave the country. And this is the thing we have to think about. But I repeat, we have to deal with the problem or with the issue of till what extent the relevant reputable organization can deal with other international observation, and let's deal with the trend. And the trend now is, allow me to use this, but I say in a very respectful way, to have infantry on the ground. Because we have a lot of capacities, but they provide the numbers, they provide the people, they provide the extensive coverage of the territory. And this is the thing that we need urgently. And for that reason, we have to encounter the ways to work in the most easy and let's say, useful manner with domestic observation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nacho. I think the question of how domestic and international election observation can cooperate better and work and stand together for implementation of recommendations, this would be the questions which bring the both spheres together. And we heard so clear statements, and it was very clear pronounced by Audrey, that only elections are only beneficial to the extent as the recommendations are implemented. So this is really the question of the essence and the justification of the election observation. And this urgency and this seriousness to work on the implementation of the recommendations, how can we, and this will be the question of next day, how can we as the election experts and activists contribute to better systems and better circumstances for bringing together. This conference is such an opportunity, but it's so far it's not accidental, but it's not yet formulated, it's not institutionalized. Which steps do we have to think to come to these institutionalized, almost better exchange in this for the recommendations, for the implementations?
Well, there are many things we are aware of: the language, the clarity. The hierarchical is not, and the number. I don't know if an immature democracy is really useful to send 35 recommendations. Guys, let's concentrate in 5, 6, 7, explain very clearly and identifying who has to be the actor, the stakeholder in charge of this. It could be the parliament, it could be the electoral administration, it could be, I don't know, the security ministry. These are the things we have to check. We have an advantage as European Union. We have embassies. We have embassies in the country, meaning if things function well, the European Union missions are a continuous missions, because we have an embassy providing papers and examining before sending the technical or the assessment mission, what is the political landscape, and then they cover the mission, and then after delivering the final report and the let's say the implementation, the follow-up, we are visiting the country 2 years later. The head of the special representative in the OSCE terminology is visiting the country, but in the meantime, our embassy has to take care of pushing the agenda of our recommendations. It depends, not always. I'm a member of the parliament. I'm not here to defend the commission or the external service. No, it functions if there is the political will of the ambassador or the embassy to really push. But this is other thing we have to be aware. We go to a country, we are independent from any mandate of the European Union, we act completely free, and we say sometimes, very frequently, not very pleasant things to the government. And then the ambassador has to stay and has to call for a meeting with the ministry or with the president after we have left the country, and this is not easy. This is not easy because other parts in the relation beside the European the electoral observation. But theoretically, we have the advantage of having an embassy permanently in the country, taking care of the recommendation and pushing for the recommendation. What's the problem? The problem is realpolitik. I'm a politician. No, I'm not an activist. I'm a politician. I know for sure what realpolitik is. I'm not a naive, but sometimes we have to take the lead and to say, guys, the European Union is in the world with a clear mandate of our treaties promoting democracy. This is at the core of the European Union foreign policy, and that mandate includes not only the Parliament, so vocal, so committed, but the external service, the Council and the Commission. And what is the problem? So this is a media thing? Okay, no problem. I'm doing anyway. Listen, what's the problem? I'm addressing Holly, but for no particular reason. To send an electoral mission has become a proof of interest, whatever is the result of the electoral mission. And this is a problem, because our view is the recommendations, our assessment has to be important for the relation with the country. You, the people leading with the relation with the country, had to take into account what we said about the election to deal with the country. No. What is happening is, whatever is the result, even if the country didn't address any one single recommendation, it's very important to say electoral mission, but this is a proof of interest. Then it's not the electoral missions influencing the policy, is the electoral mission used as a bargain chip to the general relation with the country. You have to take out this part.
This is will be broadcasted, yeah. I think you mentioned the question of credibility. What is the credibility of making a mission if then there is no follow-up and no interest in how much they are implemented, the recommendations? This is an important question, and you addressed Holly. I think maybe Holly wants to comment, to answer. In any way, I think it's time to open the discussion to all the colleagues, and I invite you to make your comments, make your questions. Don't forget, we have Olga also. You also may address Olga on the situation and the lessons we can learn from Ukraine. So if there is anybody who wants to comment and contribute, please feel invited. Yeah, can you give the mic?
Another microphone from the panel.
Thank you very much, Adam Busulanu, EPDE. Thank you very much for the excellent introduction and from different perspectives into this topic. And since the aim of this conference is to look for some concrete steps, actions on how to work together between the domestic and election observation missions. And I'm just wondering whether you would have already now. I'm sure we will discuss it tomorrow in detail. But if you maybe have already some ideas how we could improve this work. I understand we are working in our focus region in a slightly different legal environment, right? We have this OSCE legal framework to which we refer in our reports, in our assessment of the election processes, and the EU is working in a bit different environment. But maybe, and if we compare it, I see that there are some differences and there are some best practices perhaps on both sides, which we could maybe improve or implement. If you have any ideas on this already today for just to introduce this topic to continue tomorrow would be great. Thank you.
Whom would you address the question, Adam? And are there other maybe questions we can take in a role? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Adam, whom would you address the question to? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Armin Rabic from Election Watch EU, and thank you, Stefanie and EPDE, for bringing us together, and congratulations to the great panel. I would like to take advantage of having Pat Merloe and Audrey Clover and MEP Nacho, Sánchez, Amor at the panel and ask, in respect of the upcoming elections in the US, which are super important, but also in respect of the European Parliament elections, what are the plans and what's the efforts done in order to follow up to recommendations by OSCE ODIHR, and also in respect of pushing for election observation, both from international observers and from citizen-led election observers. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, Mule has another question.
Thank you very much. My name is Mule Musau. I come from Kenya. And I want also to thank EPDE for bringing us over here. I think it's a very great meeting. And we have a very serious panel here of great minds that we need to really make sure that by the time we finish this conference tomorrow, we are trying to milk everything from them. An interesting comment which came from Pat, who's been one of my mentors in this election process. They talk about democratic norms and democratic ecosystem. And Nacho Sánchez, the MEP, has talked about real democratic legitimacy. But then again, you, in my view, changed the tone when you said there is a difference. You also know real politic or real politic. Because I think for me, that is where I think the problem starts. This real politic and real political, real electoral legitimacy or democratic legitimacy and the norms that Pat is talking about, isn't that real politic the thing that we really need to change? So that the real politic is about the norms, not this other story, which in my view is what brings China, Taiwan, Russia, Ukraine, and all these other issues. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe first we go to these questions and the next will be Beata. So Mule's question, democratic ecosystem, maybe to Pat. And Armin's question on US elections to Audrey. You have been chair of the last ODIHR mission to US in 2016. Yes, 16, yeah, okay. Maybe so. Yeah. And then Adam's question to Nacho.
Well, they're interrelated in many ways. So let me try to go to the point about practical steps, because there is an advantage in Europe that we also can have at times in the United States and inside particular countries. One advantage that exists is the parliamentary process. And I'm not saying this to try to make Nacho feel like, you know, we're better friends, we're good friends. And we've known each other since the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And my thinking about this is that when the parliaments are tuned into these issues, and the parliaments speak up and ask for accountability from the executive and how the executive is functioning in its various bilateral or multilateral interests with a given government, the people are more likely to respond. So I'll give you an example, and then I'll try to wrap it up quickly. So really the most astounding example in some ways of how this all worked positively was in Peru in 1990. And I can say that in my first meeting, as there was a joint NDI Carter Center election observation over almost a 2-year period that led, was in part, and witnessed the fall of Fujimori, the democratic reform, and the democratic elections that followed. And in almost the first discussion with the U.S. ambassador, after our first pre-election mission, where we listed our state of the health and the recommendations forward, the U.S. ambassador said, well, did you think that you would come in here like with a gunboat and shoot off your cannons, and that you would not be sunk by the Fujimori government and never allowed to come back? I mean, this is, and I don't know what I can do to protect you, because this is an important country to us in the war against drugs, in the war against this, and the war against that. And what we looked at him and we said, first, our role as international election observers is to make an honest, complete assessment after consulting the key stakeholders, and to make a public statement about that. To do otherwise is corrupt. And I have to say, it was a little contentious, but he blessed us as we left and thought that perhaps we'd never come back. Well, what did we do? What did we do? We went to the members of the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate who had particular concerns about Latin America, and we knew were honest and principled people about democracy and human rights. And we talked to them. I mean, those of you who follow U.S. politics would recognize Senator Christopher Dodd, and I'd mention other names about this. And they called a hearing to which the observers were called to give testimony. And of course, they expressed their concern to the White House and the State Department about what could be done. And they talked, now we bring in the OAS, the Organization of American States, which was about to go with an observation mission. And one of the things in negotiations with the OAS was that there should be the head chief observer of the OAS mission, someone who had a history and had a stature where they could speak to the highest level of government and speak frankly. And fortunately was picked the former foreign minister of Guatemala, who did just that. And so then began collaboration between him, ourselves, the domestic observers, and we began to speak to the European Union about the importance of the EU sending observation, because how that would add. So what I'm describing is a type of advocacy that observers have to be, I won't say that I'm sophisticated, but observers have to be sophisticated in picking your targets and building your alliances. Speaking to those in the media who will help to broadcast what this is about and bring attention to the subject. I'm making this too long, but I should go fast forward to the end. There was an election. In the first round, Fujimori tried to commit a fraud so that he could avoid the second round. The Citizen Observers Transparencia had done an independent verification of the count. We knew that it was done well. The international observers all spoke about this. Pressure came on the government. The government admitted that there should be a second round, and Fujimori frustrated the attempts to correct the fraud. The OAS, the Carter Center NDI, the European Union, the domestic observers, even the Ombudsman's office, the National Ombudsman, refused to observe the second round. Fujimori was deemed president, but it was a hollow victory. He didn't last long after that. And the OAS brought forward a special meeting and a special roundtable in Peru that led to the roadmap for the democratic reforms that followed. I mean, that was a very successful story, but in it was advocacy, including, I would say, we mobilized advocacy even at the OAS. I mean, I helped draft the letter that President Carter sent to each of the delegations to the OAS to bring this to attention to the summit of the OAS. So we need these alliances, right? And those are practical steps that we need to think through, and we have to add to it in more complicated arena now with disinformation and so on, what those alliances should be.
Thank you, Pat. This sounds like quite a creative situation and finding creative solutions with different stakeholders you have. And if it's in general a beneficial situation, it works may work out. But in the end, I think it also depends on the general political background. And if it's so hostile, I would say hostile, as we have it here for some of our members and partners, one is also should find other creative solutions. But thank you for these explanations. Would you comment on the US situation?
I'll try.
Another easy question.
Yes, thank you so much, Armin, for that really very easy question. I'm not too sure what I've done to produce a question like that from you, but what I would say is that when you're observing an election in the United States, you do need to work very closely with civil society, because in effect you're working in a country which has 50 different countries, because the legislation and rules and regulations varies from state to state. So you really do need, and you have to depend very closely on working with civil society and obviously other organizations that are working in that area too, you know, international organizations, etc., etc. One thing I would think would be very important is for those who are going on the mission are trained in trying to decide what is AI and what is true and what is not true, because I can imagine in the United States elections there's going to be a tremendous amount of misinformation swimming around. So you really will need quite a lot of observers, I think. And also I think what is important in relation to all elections, but particularly in the United States, is to report it as it is. Don't try and gloss over and make it look a little less bad than the situation really is. Just have the courage to make sure that if they're making a mess up, and I won't use other language, but if they're not doing what they should be doing, the government that is, that they are called to account. And it doesn't help anyone, any country, any election, if you try and make things seem a little nicer than perhaps they really are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. To Nacho, the question, how can different stakeholders all together contribute to reinforce the implementation of recommendation? If I very briefly summarize the question of Adam, what is necessary, what is possible, and what maybe best practice or hints do you have concrete now for us?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to assess if there is a political will to do things better. And then you have to examine what are your leverage. If the country is mature in democracy, improving things, even if the level of the standard is very low, you have the leverage, and you have to use any political leverage you have, meaning using your embassies, using the maybe if the country is the case, your development cooperation funds to pay things related to the elections. For example, let's pay, instead of other things, a real permanent voter list, instead of having a mess every 4 years in the confection of the voter list. And then you have to examine the level. But what happens when there is no political will to do things better? You only have been called to produce a paper that is completely useless. It's not driving to any particular purpose. You have been here, you have produced, you have conduct your press conference, you leave, and it's done. We are not following any indication or recommendation where there is no political will. What we had is a mimicking of the real election, only to have or to appear having a democratic legitimacy. Then you have to use the hardest leverage. It's not to talk to the soft power thing. No. You have to be, let's say, consistent in the policy. Are we able to do? Well, it depends on the real politics, of course. And then you have to struggle with your own organization to try to put your assessment and elections in the general relation with the country. And this is the real struggle. This is the real thing. Because if the country is important, because the lithium, because the gas, because the terrorist organizations there, your ambassadors are saying, guys, yeah, you did a very, very good job. But we have other problems higher in the agenda in the relation with this country. And then we have to be aware of that. On the parliament, sorry, Stefanie, on the parliament, yes, it's not only about to have a political interlocutor to address the public opinion or to talk to the other, is to have the capacity, for example, to call and to summon the ambassador about how the ambassador reacted having an electoral mission. And it happened really recently in the European Union, in the Parliament, when the Parliament, after having the information of our colleagues attending electoral observation, we summoned the ambassador about the attitude of the ambassador regarding the electoral observation. And there are many, not so many things so threatening for an ambassador to be summoned for the European Parliament without any kind of coverage. It's not Borrell attending on behalf of yourself. It's you personally. You have to, let's say, to deal with the parliamentarians.
Okay, thank you. This is quite a toolbox. You want to know? We have a
one
brief
note.
comment because we have a.
So
we have
in the
Olga
Peru
also
example,
in the queue. Yeah.
In the Peru example, they did call the ambassador, but in the most recent Cambodian example, what we said, all of us said, was this is a sham circumstance. No one should observe the election. And then, you have to build something about that. So in Azerbaijan, I once went with Madeleine Albright to meet with the elder's son, who had just become president, who promised that, yes, there would be an invitation to NDI to observe the election. There was never such invitation, even though he said that directly to Madeleine Albright, because his inner circle knew what would happen if NDI came. And there was nothing that we could do to change that situation. So Nacho is absolutely right. You have to look at what is the will. If it's Zimbabwe, we know what it is in advance. Is it important perhaps to be there as a witness? That's a different calculation. But these are all part of what it means to be in an ecosystem where observers, if we recognize our role and do it right, we can play a critical role. If we don't, then we can become the instruments of some other kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Pat. Now we have Olga with a comment from Kiev, and then Beata directly next, and then Alexander. Alex.
Thank you, Stefanie. I didn't hear everything because the sound is very bad, but I believe you asked how to help to have the common position of different stakeholders for driving reforms and changes in the states or inside the state. So I have to highlight that the position that there is political will as it is very difficult for many countries, because the reason that there is political will about something is because there is a public opinion about that. And the position of civil society is very good for having campaigning about everything, very people and society, and produce this political will through the public position. Because if we are speaking about transition democracy, each of the politicians are thinking how they will be during the next campaigning. Will they have any support of society or its own district, his or her own district or not? And I believe that civil society organizations, and it doesn't matter do you work just with observation missions or generally about reforms and political circles, you need to be very professional in PR about awareness of your society about very important things as democracy and political changes. For example, we had broader discussions, does Ukraine needs to organize elections during wartime? And I need to highlight that my president has and had very strong position that if elections will happen next year, presidential elections, he will win for sure. So it was a very good position for his personal strategy how to win elections next time. But society said that we are not supporting it at all. So people said that we are not supporting it at all. And 81% of Ukrainians, according to public polls, had the same position, no elections during the whole stage of the wartime. And that's why our partners and insiders as politicians didn't have any opportunity to share the position that we need to have elections just for credibility of power and so on and so forth. That's why political will has a base, and this base is a public opinion, and we as a civil society has influence on public opinion. The same happened when OPORA fought for 10 years for having proportional system with open party list for parliamentary elections. It didn't happen in one day, but when we did many campaigning, discussions, debate for years by years through TV channels, media, and so on and so forth, the public opinion changed. And on the first position of society was that we need to have proportional system with party open list. And on the second position was proportional system with closed list, but the differences between them was 30%. So the highest levels of support of society, one of electoral system, helped us to promote these reforms. And the third example, it's about different roadmaps for countries and for states. And it doesn't matter what we are speaking about IMF credit or about EU integration. We as civil society needs to use this opportunity to include our activities, objectives, and priorities into these maps. Without that, only high-level international public and non-public stakeholders will have influence on that. OPORA and other civil society organizations promoted last year inside EU to give Ukraine a chance to be a candidate of EU integration process. And one of the main argue from our side to our partners, like ministers of foreign affairs, MPs from different parliaments, representatives of different organizations, was that if you will give us this status, we will use it as opportunity for fighting for best reforms in Ukraine. Without that status, we will not have this chance, because this status is the key and top priority for Ukrainian government and Ukrainian president. And we as a civil society will negotiate with our foreign partners what is most important for Ukrainian society. And I believe that democratic reforms is already, and I know that democratic reforms is already on European Commission report about EU integration track for Ukraine. And I believe that electoral reforms will be a part of the roadmap after the openness of negotiation with Ukraine. That's why we need to use our partners in good manner to help to build political will from abroad and to use public opinion inside Ukraine and inside each of the country to build this political will inside the state. Sorry for my wording, but I believe you understood what I'm speaking.
It was a long explanation, but a very useful and a right one, I think, to bind the political will of the elites to the public opinion and how this can be influenced. And I would say is a typical Ukrainian answer on such a question. And thank you very much for that, Olga. So now we have Beata, Alex, and then Holly, and maybe you comment in a row, and then we give back to the panel.
Great,
okay?
Fantastic. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to see all of the colleagues on stage in the audience. But I wanted to pick up on this thread of building alliances. I think this is especially crucial, and to me, what Audrey says about follow-up to recommendations is really at the heart of this cooperation. It's something that we've talked about for a very long time within the DOP community. We've talked about having common return visits, having common platforms to launch our recommendations, and to try to work together to implement them over the long electoral cycle. But some thoughts maybe from the high-level panel about how we can actually put that into practice. We came very close in Kenya. It almost happened. And then for various logistical reasons, we were not able to bring it about. But then also from the European Union side, I think there's a formidable instrument there that can be brought to bear even within the OSCE region. And some 10 years years ago, we had an action plan where the EU committed to follow up on recommendations, also ODIHR recommendations, and whether we can bring that about to see whether delegations, the various policy instruments can be brought to bear to try to move that discussion forward in the places that the EU observes, but also in the OSCE region.
Pleasure to be here as well. I'm really glad it's finally happening, our conference. I want to pick up on what Olga was talking about. I wanted to comment exactly in the same vein that the political will is to be shaped by the needs of the people and their recognition that things need to improve. But the question that I have is that, yes, it could function like this in a relatively functioning democracies where the public opinion is informed, where there is an opportunity to form an opinion and to consider different options. But what to do in the illiberal regimes where I have serious doubts whether the people are actually very well informed of the work that we are doing, be it international observers or the citizen observers. Okay, I'm not talking about Turkmenistan where they can't even read the reports of the observers because the website is blocked, but places that are almost like Turkmenistan, where I have doubts of whether people have actually understand what we're doing and have the sense of these concepts that we're operating with. What more can be done in those environments and how to do that? Maybe we could use the opportunity to explore this topic as well in this conference.
Hi, I just really appreciate all of the speakers and who I draw a lot of inspiration from and have for a long time. I wanted to go back to a point that Audrey raised. She gave us a call to action also about how to make sure that election observation itself doesn't become extinct. And I think Nacho also was very open with us, and I appreciate that openness, Nacho, about the realpolitik that we're facing. And when I started election observation, we were really at the start of a wave, and there was a lot of commitment to values of human rights and democracy, democratic principles, and the context is changing very quickly. And I think we're going to need the bravery of Olga and others in this room, and Pat has called on us to up our game. But I wonder, what do you see, all of you, as the opportunities for maybe recommitting ourselves to the underlying principles of election observation? And I mean domestic, but also international observation. How do we, what formats do we have, or what opportunities do we have for to really recommit to this human rights-based approach, as Nacho said? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with so many friends. Just one reflection after more than 10 years in the business, if we can look at the entire world, we can see that in Asia, we are not invited anymore. In Africa, once we are invited once, they will not invite us back. And they use all the possible excuse, even if when they invite us, not to let us enter. It happened with Ethiopia, it happened with Angola, now it's happening as we speak with RDC, Congo. We have a mission there. This may be about to come back because our satellite phone cannot enter the country. And then we have Latin America, where we are still invited because this is important for the opposition, for us to be there. And so if I look at the world, I have the impression that we are more useful as in the time being in Latin America than elsewhere. But this is really my personal impression. And so if we see that there are more and more disinformation against our own missions, so even that, I think, is something that we have to work with. Nacho didn't mention, but when he was in the Maldives, they did disinformation on him as a chief observer. They did disinformation on us in in Zimbabwe, saying that our observers were bribed, etc. So this question of disinformation on our mission is really new. And then also the impression that the Russians are like teaching many countries how to get rid of us or how to cheat on us. So there are really new challenges that are ahead of us, and I'm really happy that we are among the stakeholders that are working on this issue to explore this also tomorrow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, for this last very serious, very open, and very difficult question. And I think one has to think very deep about that. So, thank you for the last question, the last round of question. I will give it to the panel. Alex's first was Beata. The platforms, the visits, over the electoral cycle, how we put it into practice. This was the question of Beata, and an action plan for the following up of recommendations. Maybe to Audrey this question, yeah, of Beata and of Alexander, how to work in the illiberal regimes, which is so much more difficult, and which goes a little bit to the direction of Christina's last question, how to shape the public opinion in these countries, and Holly's question, recommitting ourselves to the underlying basis of election observation. This may be to Pat, this question, yeah, I have got so. And I would invite you to the last round of answers, or have you any questions, last chance? No, then we, Olga has a comment. You would, Olga, I invite you then, or maybe you start with your answers, and then we go to Audrey, and yeah, okay.
Okay, I have a short comment about election observation standards. And I believe that this sphere is about self-awareness and self-management. So when we are speaking about parliaments, the best practice is to develop code of conducts, but not from external groups, but inside. And then there is an opportunity that politicians will accept, not just adopt, the common value, the common rules, and the common practices in the future. That's why I don't see any other perspective to have election observation standards as to work the international observers groups and local observers groups together, and to work on these code of conducts not on theory, but on practical stage, time to time on regular base. So it's a best practice for parliaments, and I believe it's a best practice for such groups as we are. Code of conducts, and we had already some norms, some documents which were developed by international and local organizations. Let's moving forward through these documents on practical stage, and to think how to assess our own activity time to time about how we're working according to these standards, because we can produce judges or prosecutors or establish special tribunal for having solutions and decisions about each of the missions. So it's about self-management story. And Alex asked a very important question about illiberal regimes and how to deal with them. So what I truly believe in, that there is no any endless illiberal regimes. My grandmother and grandfather were prisoners, political prisoners, during USSR period. And nobody believed that the USSR will collapse, for sure. We have to do lessons learned from our history already. So each of the illiberal regime or illiberal leader will collapse. But sometimes it's because of us, like we did a little bit in Ukraine during Kuchma time and then Yanukovych period. But we still didn't have these irreversible processes in the country. So they were stopped because of mass of people out of their homes. And this is not a case for Belarus now, for sure. But what I believe in, Alex, that you have a great new generation of potential leaders of Belarus, free Belarus, and you need to continue develop your own capacity as outsiders government and to prepare your experts, your potential politicians, which will back to Belarus when you will have very small window of opportunity after the end of Lukashenko regime. He is human being. He will die. But it doesn't mean that you will be ready to replace, this regime because you will have enough human resources for that. That's why continue what you're doing. Don't think about public opinion now, because it doesn't matter for authoritarian or totalitarian regime what people are thinking about, but because these regimes are engineering the public opinion, because people are afraid to think in other matter or another manner than official position of these leaders. So I truly support you and your work, and I believe that you need to focus on this potential window of opportunity and to be ready as a big group of people which will know what to do in a very short period of time.
Good, thank you, Olga. Be prepared, and it's still an optimistic intervention. Thank you for that. Nacho, would you comment on maybe the question of either Holly or Beata?
Yeah, on the last EU OSCE. When I arrived to the European Parliament, there was the idea, very vague, because we have money, we can do anything. Sorry to say this way, we can buy 10 ODIHRs. Luckily, no problem. No problem at all. Luckily, there was a very, very reasonable person like Christina and others, and some colleagues coming from OSCE to the European Parliament and pledging the excellent work of ODIHR historically. And we don't need to substitute a thing that is perfectly functioning, and what we have to is to use and to collaborate. And the thing, I think this agreement of not interfering is a good thing that's happening, and we are very happy of having this. There is a problem on the lack of invitations. OSCE has a clause, meaning you have to extend, or you have an extended invitation, mandatory, but the European Union has not this issue. I put forward an idea that has been fully defeated. Not always my ideas are able to come out. My idea was very simple, because to try to avoid the lack of invitations, it's true that after the invitation, a country not willing to have a mission that create a lot of problems, but at least the first impediment, it could be overcome with this idea. The same we oblige any country dealing with the European Union on trade and any other issue, obliging the countries to have a human rights dialogue. We can say the same. You are obliged, if you sign an agreement, a political agreement with the European Union, a political and trade agreement, this agreement is going to include a standing invitation. And then we decide. My idea has been defeated. It's not. It encounters some audience, even in some papers. There was, but at the end, my colleagues refused, and the external service always refused. What I say to our good friend Neil McCall, okay, Neil, let's encounter other way, because the problem is still the same. We are having no invitations to attend the meetings. And on what to do, Holly, what to do on realpolitik, what to do in this illiberal state. I think there is a message we have to convey to the public opinion, to our public opinion, that is, values and principles are very performative on matters of security. The message is a world of democracies is a safer world, meaning the problems in the international arena are because the authoritarian countries and authoritarian rulers are completely unpredictable. The fear, the greed, the headache of one single person could trigger a real crisis. democracies are boringly predictable. We have public opinion, we have freedom of press, we have parliaments, we have many, many check and balances, and at the end, it's not easy that democracy is jumping with a strange thing. And for that reason, when we try to promote democracy, we are not only promoting our way of life, we have to run away from this idea of westernizing the thing. No, we are promoting a safer world, because a world of democracies is a safer world. I think it's a good message.
Thank you. Thank you, Nacho. Also positive word. Pat, maybe your answer still have a final word from your side, and maybe we have 1 or 2 minutes, so we will then go to the buffet.
So then I can be short by saying I agree completely, Nacho, with what you just said. I mean, our reality is one in which illiberalism is still gaining ground. I mean, you know, we only have to look at the recent elections in Europe, Poland being the exception. We only have to look at the trend in Argentina. We only have to look at what's going on in the United States today. Yeah, the Netherlands, and so on. So we're in that arena. So realpolitik aside, we have to be realistic about what is our own circumstance. We have to remember that we are here to sustain ourselves in the longer run. You know, as Olga said, in a given country, whether it's Myanmar or whether it's Azerbaijan or whether it's, you know, today Venezuela or even worse today in Zimbabwe, the people who are the citizens of those countries, and that's where we believe authority and sovereignty resides, are somehow guarding themselves, trying to build their capacities and building towards what a better future might be. The international community, as we're part of that, are trying to do what we can do to reinforce and to help them. Election observation might not be relevant in some of those countries sometime. It might be best not to do it. And that's the valued base that, you know, Holly and others, all of us, you know, have talked about. And so we're in a country, there is the power to dominate, and that power is not threatened, then the ability of the international community and the citizens to bring about any meaningful progress is stymied for periods of time. But Olga's right, you know, it breaks through eventually, right? For me, at age 23, when there was a coup d'etat in Chile and the elected government of Salvador Allende came to an end, including his death, and thousands disappeared, Chileans built and built and built and built until finally they brought about the end of that military regime, first through a plebiscite and then reform and elections. We all should incorporate that into our spirits. I believe we should all incorporate that into our spirits. And so I think Christina's invitation that we should be practical about where we can go or where we can make a difference also has to be put up against the call from the citizens in those places to, if possible, be there to give them cover, protection, and help. And so as internationals, you know, we're looking at this one way, and as citizens, we're looking at this dynamic the other. And there's no easy answer about how we should act, except to keep our, you know, eyes on the goal of being principled, telling the truth, offering solidarity, and doing everything that we can do.
Thank you, Pat. Audrey.
Fine, that was a very interesting point that you raised, Beata, and obviously a very difficult one, or else the situation would have changed before now. Unfortunately, within the OSCE, because of the unanimity rule, it's not possible for the ODIHR to try and introduce any sort of practice as such, or any rule, because we all know that, you know, there will be one country that will not wish to go along with that. Some states who have made changes do from time to time explain what has happened, but I think we almost need a brainstorming exercise to decide how it's going to be possible. I mean, I think the ODIHR could gently start asking countries, perhaps after 6 to 9 months, as to what they have done. Have they done anything? This could perhaps gently become a practice, but I think a brainstorm as to
how we can actually get states to implement their recommendations would be useful. And perhaps at some stage you could tell us about what happened and nearly happened in Kenya. That would be very helpful. But it is a very important issue and one which has a great effect on the whole of election observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audrey, for that comment. Thank you to Pat, thank you, Nacho, thank you, Olga, for this discussion. I think we have very much to think about. Still, I understand we have quite a toolbox. We have a toolbox, but I have a feeling we have to reshuffle the instruments, reorder them, regroup them, maybe shift the priorities, shift resources, think through, adapt the structures, the methods to the new circumstances which require such a rethinking. And I think we are here only here in the room. There are lots of people who have all these capacities and experience to do that. And we would be glad from EPD to contribute as much as we can to this process. We will be not the only ones, but I think it is a process which is going, and we are like in a mosaic part of that. And for that, I would quote finally Olga, because she made an important point. For that, we need to work hard, believe in what we want to change, and work on a daily basis. And if we work so, I think we can get a step forward. So I'm sure we meet again soon and continue working and thinking on these questions. And thank you very much again. And now we have a great opportunity to have drinks and continue talking about elections. Upstairs, The colleagues tell me we are upstairs where it's still even more beautiful. So one floor up. That's the seventh floor. Yeah, seventh floor. Thank you very much.